My name is David McGriff. I'm an attorney based in Los Angeles. I specialize in protecting the rights of athletes and entertainers. Welcome to NIL Active. On today's episode, we have Pete Schoenthal, the CEO of Athliance. How you doing, Pete?
Great. First and foremost, thank you for the intro music with that ringtone.
Yeah.
And second of all, listen, I'm a fan just because you could say my name, right? Not everyone can pronounce my last name. So the fact that you nailed that, you now have what I call a friend of the show, right?
All
You
right.
need me on there.
Okay, good. We're off to a great start. So for those people who aren't familiar with their background, how did you get involved in NIL? What was kind of the background to starting Athliance?
Yes. Yeah. So it's a very interesting story, different than most. I'm the CEO of Athliance. We are a software and consulting company in the name, image, and likeness space, specializing in compliance and data for schools, collectives, agencies, brands, etc. My background is unique. My father wasn't around when I was growing up. And so I was going down a bad path while I was in high school, and I played high school football, and I had coaches that invested in me. They saw something in me. Not as a player. I'm a 5'8" white Jewish kid, but they saw something in me. So because of them, I went to college. I go to Florida State University, going down a bad path, and spoke to my high school football coach one day. And he let me have it after I told him everything I was doing. And then he said, Peter, I think you should go to law school. So I went to the University of Miami School of Law. My last year, I had a job lined up as a public defender in Miami. So I didn't need that fancy internship. And so I wanted to give back, and I coached inner city youth football here in Miami. I am the world's worst coach. I had kids end up at Alabama, Miami, Florida State, LSU, you name it, never won a championship. But if you know anything about South Florida recruiting, it's a very dirty space. So when my kids started getting recruited, I didn't want them dealing with dirty street agents. So the rule that we had was if we could drive, we would go. So I would take trips to Florida State, UF, Miami, UCF, you name it. And I got very close with compliance officers because they knew they never had to worry about me, right? At this time, I'm running my own law practice. I'm a criminal defense attorney at the time. And if you know anything about compliance, they kind of hold the keys to the castle as it pertains to universities.
Right.
So I got really close with a few, got deemed a guardian by the NCAA with the help of some compliance officers so I could do official visits. Fast forward about 21, 22 months before NIL starts, it gets announced. And a bunch of my athletes reached out to me and said, Coach Pete, can I make money? And I said, not yet. We got some time. But my first thought process with who's going to protect these athletes, right? Who is going to help them file their taxes, right? I don't want to represent them in federal court on tax evasion charges.
Right.
So a buddy of mine runs a tech company. We started brainstorming. We reached out to the actual compliance officers that I knew, and they all told us the same thing. Marketing and branding will take care of itself. We need to know what our athletes are doing before it's too late, i.e. accepting money so we can protect them in our university. And so we started partnering with schools around the country. We built a software, and here we are.
That's excellent. That's a great. I love the background of your story. It makes complete sense why you're in the space that you're in, why you're in the position that you're in. You're absolutely correct. Compliance is one of the keys to NIL. And early on, I started doing deals, basically right after July 1st, and a lot of the universities hadn't got that down yet. There was a lot of kind of throwing darts against the wall to kind of figure out how they are going to protect their players, protect their student athletes. And a service like yourself, like the one that you run, is absolutely vital for universities to make sure they're doing the right thing, protecting the student athletes and giving them an opportunity.
Yeah, and I still think schools are throwing darts. This space changes, as you know, every day. It's going to take 4 or 5 years to figure out. Schools are trying to deal with this internally with individuals that have been working in college athletics, which oftentimes can be a mistake because NIL is something that is so new to college athletics that maybe this isn't something that should be handled by just compliance or just branding. You sometimes need to bring in outside actors that understand marketability and things of that nature. And things change. Like one of the things that we realized year one, if we were going to do well in this space, is in every other aspect of college athletics, the administrative work is not done by the athlete. But when it comes to disclosing deals, we're asking them to now do the administrative work without them understanding why. So we've created softwares for collectives, for agents, for lawyers, where they can do the disclosures on behalf of the athletes and communicate with the universities because the best way to go in this space to protect the athletes is kind of to allow those helping them to do the administrative work without them having to do it.
Yeah, and I think that sorry,
No, you're good.
I think that those points are critical, especially when you're talking about the talent that a university needs to possibly bring in from the outside to assist them in this process. Duke basketball hired a GM who worked for Nike, and it was specific to Duke basketball. It wasn't for Duke entirely, but just for their basketball team. Do you think moves like that, hires like that, are going to continue in the NIL space?
Yes, I also think you're going to see the more important role be, especially. All right, so let's back up. You bring up a great point. I think when Duke started that and when they hired that individual, schools were starting to gear up to bring NIL fully in house, right? Secure deals, use their marks and their logos to help kids. Well, we can't do that anymore. About 6-7 weeks ago, the NCAA, in my opinion, rightfully created a separation of church and state. If you think Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State have an advantage now, let them go get deals for their kids, right? That gap widens.
Right.
Now, what I think you're going to see are people that are liaisons to their collectives, to their local communities, right? Almost that understand strategic partnerships and business, right? Because one of the worst things we did in this space was call it NIL. Giving it this funky little name makes people think it's something different than what it really is, right?
Yes.
Some people think that when you take that dirty little word plus the lack of legislation early on and a lack of enforcement, people think this is just bag dropping, right?
Yes.
And really all that we're dealing with is athletes now have the right to publicize themselves and market themselves and capitalize on that. And so I think you're going to see people that understand that, but have good community relationships and good relationships with their donor and booster base, so they can make sure that their collectives are carrying out the will of the university so everyone is safe. Because right now, schools are responsible for their outside actors, and they are guilty until proven innocent. And that is a difficult part to conceptualize because the schools can't be part of the facilitation, right? I don't envy the role of university administrators, but I also think we're finally at a point where we have the rules that we need.
Yeah, I mean, administrators have been called upon to do a lot of things in their capacity as educators, and then NIL comes along and it brings a completely different layer to what is required of them, what's expected from them, and frankly, most of them are, the vast majority of them were not equipped to handle this new layer of responsibility.
Not only that, it goes even deeper, right? Before NIL started, compliance did compliance work, right? They stayed in their corner. Branding did their stuff, right? They did their general counsel did their stuff. Well, now you're bringing in something that touches everything, and you're asking people that have never really worked together and kind of had a chain of command and kind of like a conveyor belt, right? To now do that, and there's a struggle. There's internal strifes. Nobody knows who the point person is on something. Who do I go to? And so I know, as someone who represents athletes, you don't always get a quick response from schools when you're looking to do something in a scenario where we need quick answers. And it's very frustrating at times.
Absolutely. I mean, I've come up against that so many different times. Very frustrating for the athletes, frustrating for brand partners, frustrating for all involved. You talked about, I just wanted to go back to that point about NIL. And I think a lot of people, public, even people who were, supposedly should know better, didn't even realize the NIL is actually an acronym that stands for name, image, and likeness. And they weren't really focusing on the part of the story that these rights were stripped from student athletes. So if a young lady who's attending USC has a social media presence and she's able to monetize that social media presence, but her classmate down the hall can't because she plays volleyball, that is something that never made sense to me. Right, that needed to be restored and effectively was restored. And so now it's like, okay, we have this now. I wanted to ask you specifically about the NCAA and the role of the NCAA, because so from the very beginning, the NCAA was behind the 8 ball on NIL. They knew what was coming down the road, and yet they didn't put anything in place to really attack it when it actually came in place. It was actually effective. And
I have
instead
a
they have
different take on that. I can't believe I'm going to stand up for the NCAA, but I weirdly have a different take on that.
okay.
My take on that is they were things happened that derailed them that are partially their fault, but not their fault. So let's do a timeline. All right.
Okay. Sure.
How did NIL come about? Right. California basically said our athletes starting in 2024 are going to be able to profit off their name, image, and likeness.
Right.
The NCAA said over our dead body. And
Yep.
California said, great, we'll take you to federal court and we'll sue you. And by the way, we'll bring up amateurism versus employment. And the NCAA said, NIL for all, right? We don't want any part of that fight, right?
Right.
You're going to do that in 2024. All right. And then things are moving. They're starting to slowly get ready, probably not as fast as they should have. And then out of nowhere, what happens? The state of Florida announces, hey, we're moving this up to 2021, July of 2021, not August of 20, right? We're moving this up 2 years. And I'm sorry, California was going to start in 2023.
Yeah.
So they move it up to 2 years with about 21 months to get ready for it, right? So that already crunched it. And as the NCAA was going to get ready, because remember, the NCAA couldn't sue Florida because if they sued them to stop it in 21, it goes back to the same argument of, great, if you do that, we'll counter sue with employment versus amateurism.
Right.
So the NCAA's hands were tied. Well, what happened literally a month or two after Florida made that announcement? COVID hit. Schools during COVID are trying to figure out how to get kids on campus, run games, bring the NCAA is working on championship schedules. They were never able to get on top of NIL, and it became this perfect storm. Here's the problem, though. I shed no tears for the boy who cried wolf. They had 115 years to get this right, and they didn't. But in their defense, when it became apparent that this was going to happen, their clock got sped up by about 200%. And it put them in a really weird spot. And so here we are.
Right. Now, and do you think that the NCAA needs to make their case as still the enforcer for college athletics, make an example out of a university or collective or something to maintain their status?
Yes. And I think that's okay. I actually love what the NCAA is saying right now, even if they're not doing it because they want to. They're doing it as the courts are telling them, which is we're not going after athletes. Right now, we're going after schools and we're going after collectives. And listen, you and I talked off air. We are both proponents of athlete empowerment. That doesn't mean we're proponents of no rules. This space is out of control. It's actually getting to the point where the lack of rules and the lack of enforcement are leading to too many rumors getting out and athletes actually getting misled on what's actually out there and getting taken advantage of. And so there needs to be enforcement. People need to know that you just can't do whatever you want. And there needs to get to a little bit of semblance of uniformity. But I also think we need to get to a point of athletes having employment rights and revenue generating athletes coming to the table and having a say in those media rights and unionizing. That's a whole nother podcast and one we can go for 2 hours on. I truly believe that that's coming.
Yes.
But that's a great transition for me into what's happening out there. Let's be honest, is very illegal and kind of dirty with these deals, and they're not NIL. And we are justifying what's happening because athletes aren't getting paid a salary that deserve to get that. They are two separate issues.
They are.
When we talk about NIL, let's talk about NIL.
Yes.
That doesn't mean that we don't think athletes should be able to have a seat at the table and profit off of who they are.
Right.
That doesn't mean that because we believe athletes should get paid that we should turn a blind eye to the Wild West that's happening.
Correct.
Both can be true. Both can work together. But let's stop conflating because we don't like the NCAA.
Right. Now, the conflation has to stop primarily because there are two separate rights. One is the intellectual property right. One is a right for the individual to monetize his or her name, image, and likeness. And the other one is getting compensated for actually playing on the field. And that those things have been conflated since the beginning of NIL. And it's very irritating to me for that conflation to happen. But your point is a good one, that in order to really say it, with your chest out, about keeping it to not be conflated, we have to make sure the NIL is done right. We can't say because the NCAA has been getting over on student athletes for generations, and because student athletes have been basically, without having their rights restricted. They haven't been able to be represented. They haven't had a seat at the table. That we could just let everything in NIL go unmarked. We can't do that.
Let's
It has
be
to be
honest.
done right.
Yeah, let's be honest. The only way the NCAA gets out of having to eventually pay athletes is if they get an antitrust exemption.
Mhm.
The only reason Congress is even talking about NIL right now and maybe considering that antitrust exemption, which I don't think they'll get, but the only reason it's even being floated is because of how the NIL space has been such a wild west that everyone's getting all worked up about it. We need to put guardrails in place,
Yeah.
right? So if the space was what it was supposed to be and it was the utopia which it can be, there would really be 0% chance and zero avenue for the NCAA to actually potentially railroad athletes down the road.
That's right. That's right. And so that is it may be counterintuitive to have this discussion, and people are thinking like athletes are just getting these rights back, and you're already talking about putting parameters on it, because the idea from the very beginning was that it was going to be there was supposed to be parameters about it around it. It was supposed to be specifically compensation for name, image, and likeness, and not a disguise for something else.
Well, think about what the disguise is, right? And let's we want to talk about athletes getting salaries and treating this more. And when we say athletes, we're talking about revenue generating athletes.
Yes.
That's not everyone. That's not every sport. That's
Yes.
not every level, right?
Yeah.
So if we get athletes rightfully that deserve it, the employment status that they need, and we model it that way, what NIL becomes, right? Like with the bag dropping and the collectives. Think about if Tua Tagovailoa became a free agent, and a group of Texans fans created a GoFundMe to get him an extra $2 million to go to the Texans. We would lose our minds.
Yeah.
We're like, this is illegal. This is weird. There's a salary cap. That's what's happening.
Yes.
That is what is happening.
Yes.
And so when you look at it from that lens, it sounds stupid. So we'll eventually get there. We live in an instant gratification society with Twitter and Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
We're a year and a half into something that is brand new. It's going to take 5 years to figure it out.
Right.
So I always tell people, it's not like pump the brakes on the sky is falling.
Yes.
But we still need to have those conversations.
Yeah. There's always an in between that, not extremes on either side. The combination of the transfer portal and NIL, people are calling it free agency, or there's liking it to professional free agency. You just mentioned a free agent situation where the Titans fans are setting up a GoFundMe. What's your thoughts on that? Is this the same thing as NFL free agency now?
No, but I also think this year and maybe next year, but specifically this year, a little bit of an anomaly. Like let's look back at last year's transfer portal. It is nowhere near what it was this year, right? And so let's look at that, right? First, you have the year one of NIL, and I think as someone that represents athletes, you've seen a lot of the NIL space and a lot of these quote unquote deals are driven by rumor. They're not that true, right?
Right.
You have a lot of people within locker rooms that feel that like freshmen got deals that they actually didn't get, and they're a little turned off by that.
Mm-hmm.
You have athletes that want to leave their school to go to other schools because they're sitting at their school being like, wait a minute, I'm not getting taken care of like that. And all these other kids are when they're really not, right? And then add that to the fact that a lot of these kids that are juniors, right, and seniors, maybe sophomores, didn't get the chance during their recruitment to have NIL opportunities. So this is their fresh way to go try to chase the bag, right? Even though that's illegal, we know what's happening out there.
Right.
Add that to the fact that a lot of these kids that are transferring are what I call COVID kids, where they didn't get to take official visits. They didn't get to have in-home visits. They may have made decisions on schools that they wouldn't have gone to if it were a different scenario. And so I think that perfect storm comes together and is creating this insanity. I think the transfer portal is always going to play a part in this. It is a form of free agency, but in any sport, free agency has rules and guidelines and windows. And I wouldn't want to be a college football coach right now. This is a ridiculous. Where's your free time? Where is your time to take your family on vacation right now? So the answer to that is this is a form of free agency. But I also think this year is a little bit of an anomaly as it pertains to we had the perfect storm happen.
Right. And if it is a form of free agency, is that necessarily a bad thing?
No. Listen, coaches move around all day, right? The best way to curtail this and put parameters in place is to collectively bargain with the athletes. Give them a seat. Maybe there's a scenario where unless your coach leaves, maybe freshmen shouldn't be able to transfer. You should have to sit a year. By the way, that allows kids to develop, gets them a chance to, understand that it's okay to go from being the big fish in a small pond to the small fish in the big pond, right? And you got to earn your way. And it also creates more opportunity for the juniors and the seniors that need to move, right? Where the kids that just came in, you just got there, right? So that's where collective bargaining comes in. I think it's important to have set transfer windows so we know when this is going, like just like we have free agency windows.
Yeah.
And so I just think we need to get to a point where there's guardrails, but we can't really put guardrails in place based on what happened in the courts unless we bring the athletes to the table. I think if the NCAA really wanted to gain some more control and they wanted to get what, and keep a semblance, I'd come to the table now with athletes. I don't know what they're waiting for. In fact, if they really wanted to take advantage of athletes and get a bigger piece of the pie, they should not wait for the courts to do it. They should do it on their own right now. And let's see how easy it is for 100,000 athletes to come together and unionize and, 18 to 21-year-olds go argue and fight with athletic directors and university presidents. You think owners get over on NFL players? Let's do that on this level. But if the courts get involved, I think there's more guardrails and athletes will actually be more protected. So it's probably a good thing that the NCAA hasn't come to the table yet.
That's for the athletes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that the transfer portal is always looked at something as potentially negative, something that only athletes benefit from. But it's actually coaches benefit from the transfer portal greatly as well. I mean, personally, my son is going to a university. He plays basketball. Their team went from they were 6-24 last year. They went and through the transfer portal, they brought in 10 new players, and they're starting off the season 7-1. So it's not, the transfer portal is not only a thing that is something that only benefits student athletes. I think programs and coaches particularly can benefit from transfer portal. So it's not all a bad thing. Everyone's looking for new opportunities and opportunities to better their own brands and their programs.
The transfer portal, like NIL, if done right, is great for everyone.
Right.
Without guardrails and weird stuff going on, it comes. What I want us to get away from is I want us to actually get to a place of where this stuff makes sense. So we stop giving the detractors a reason to detract.
Yes.
All the people that said NIL was bad, well, what's happening now is we're giving them a reason to say, see, we told you so. Right. When that's ridiculous. There was never a reason for athletes not to be able to profit off of who they are. Use the female basketball player. It's the best example around. That never made sense. Yep. But we're giving the haters a reason to hate. Let's stop that.
That's true. That's true. And that's really unfortunate, but it's only because it's not being done right. If it was being done right, then we wouldn't have a problem. Let's go to a more fun topic about brand partnerships. Is there any brand partnerships either that you've been involved in or just something that you've seen that you really, really like? You're like, they nailed it. That's what NIL is all about.
Yeah, I know he's transferring, but I love DeColdest Crawford at Nebraska with the AC, man. That was awesome. You want the coldest air in Lincoln, take it from the coldest Crawford, right? Yeah. And get your AC from there. I loved what Kenny Pickett did early on in Pittsburgh, where he had the opportunity to have an individual deal with a local restaurant. And instead of getting paid, he negotiated that his offensive line could come in once a week and get a free meal. Love that. Giving back to your teammates. Dylan Gibbons is a great example of what NIL could be, using his name and his brand for philanthropic efforts to help out Timothy Donovan, who has a physical disability, so he could go and watch games. He started Timmy Datali. Next thing you know, it created such buzz, and he was able to raise a lot of money for this individual. He started Big Man, Big Heart, an organization that is a 501c3 that helps a lot of individuals. And then, by the way, when you do the right thing, good things happen to you, right? When Dylan Gibbons first started this, and he's an offensive lineman at Florida State, he had a couple thousand followers. But next thing you know, Game Day's running a piece on him with Marty Smith, and he's probably one of the biggest earners at Florida State, and probably has close to 50, 60,000 followers, which makes him more marketable, which makes him more money. So those are a few examples that I absolutely love.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't realize how much of an upside that he received because he went ahead and did something, created this 501c3 organization and was doing something philanthropic. That's That's amazing.
Yeah, he's selling merch. He's getting awards. He's on TV, and it all started by doing the right thing. He just wanted to find a way to raise $10,000 so a fan could come down and watch him play, who was a big fan of his when he was at Notre Dame before he transferred, right? Awesome,
Right.
to
Right.
Florida State. Like, there was no way Dylan Gibbons was like, I'm going to raise money so people follow me more and give me deals. No, you want to do the right thing. People got wind of it, and he got a windfall from it, and good for him. That's what this is all about.
That's what it's all about. Earlier today, I was on Twitter, and there was a comment about one of the key drivers to building revenue in the NIL space would be licensing deals involving the schools and their trademarks. I think that ultimately will happen. I think it's going to be it's going to take a very circuitous route. I think for it to actually happen. I think there's going to be or maybe be some schools involved, and then dominoes will fall. What do you think about that? And also, there's the idea that if the universities are involved, how much of a cut are they going to take versus how much the student athletes take?
Yeah. All right. So it's a loaded question, but a good one, because we were really close to getting that done before we got this last legislation, right? As schools were getting ready to bring NIL fully in house and help their athletes, well, then they could use their partnerships with whoever controls the rights to their marks, like Learfield and others, right, to get more involved and to allow athletes to use those trademarks and those logos, right? We're also talking a lot about group licensing. Athletes struggle to understand group licensing right now because it's like, wait a minute, you want me to opt in and I'm going to get 10% of the jersey sale? That's my jersey. Like I could go sell a T-shirt with the colors and not have the logo and make 100%, and people will buy it. Like, I get that. When it comes to jerseys, schools are always going to control that. But I think we're going to get to a point where schools are starting to get forced to share and use the logos so long as the athlete clears the deal with the school to make sure that the brand of the university is not getting devalued, right? Listen, let's be honest with it. You go to Clemson University, you want to use the logo. You're not going to be able to do medical marijuana deals probably, or, OnlyFans, like, right? The school needs to be able to protect their brand. But I'm also a believer in free market. We're going to get to a point, we see it sometimes, where one school is recruiting an athlete and that school doesn't allow the athlete to use the logos and the marks, right? And then another school is recruiting that athlete and they say, listen, if you come here, we'll actually open that up and allow that. And once that happens and that athlete goes back to the other school, you're going to see schools loosen their restrictions on their logos. So the free market will eventually dictate that, because that's a big part of athletes getting deals. A lot of these brands want that logo in there. And so schools are going to have to decide, if it's not a partner of ours and it's just a basic deal, are we okay if we're comfortable with the brand working with that athlete? Because if we restrict that athlete, we're taking money out of their pockets. How's that negatively going to impact our university?
That's right. That's right. I mean, that can negatively impact the recruiting. Goes down the line. When I have clients that are looking to establish brand deals, one of the pieces of advice I give them is to start with what they know. All right, where do they go eat? Where do they like to eat? A few times a week. What products do they use? What services do they use personally? Because they know it better, and it's the brand relationship can be more organic. What advice do you have for athletes trying to forge relationships with brands?
The first one is a weird one. Don't be
Okay.
afraid to say no.
Mm-hmm.
Athletes feel like they have to say yes to every deal. Like anything in life, you have to do things that fit you and what you believe in, because you can water down your brand. You can hurt your brand, right? You don't have to say yes to everything. And make sure you're like, it's okay to say no if you don't feel like you're getting your value either, right? That's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I love athletes starting with smaller local brands and getting reps, right? NIL is like everything else in life. The more you do, the better you get at it. You
Mm-hmm.
know, working with athletes, some of these deliverables have been awful, which is why a lot of these brands don't want to get back into the space.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to what I originally said, with aligning yourself with things that you believe in, align yourself with things that you also like. Those are the things that you can easily support, that you can actually easily promote, because the biggest driver of repeat NIL work is how authentic your posts are, how authentic you are in promoting that brand. People know when you're being authentic. And by being authentic, you're aligning yourself with brands that you like. I love that when you speak with athletes, the first thing you talk about is, where do you like to eat? Let's start with an easy one. All right,
Mhm.
great. This is the local restaurant. Let's start with
Mhm.
maybe getting you some free meals and a couple dollars in your pocket. Let's see what that post looks like. All right, now let's step it up. Right. So learn how to walk. Learn how to crawl before you walk, before you run. Um,
Mhm.
and I think a lot of athletes are so caught up in what's being out, being released with these big deals and these national that they're not hitting enough singles. There's so many
Yeah.
little deals out there that add up that they're neglecting, which is a great place to start. I'm a big believer that whether you're a D1, D2, D3 athlete, whether you play football or you're a volleyball player, if you know what you're doing, where to go, how to get creative and put a little bit of work in, every athlete in the country can make $1,000 a month.
That's dope. I'm hoping that the student athletes are watching this, because um, that the way you phrased it is perfect, and I think it's absolutely correct. I know it from personal experience that that's correct, and I think more people need to just be more aggressive, take advantage of the opportunities that's afforded to them with this new NIL policy.
We need to tell people and let athletes know that NIL is for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Like one of the big areas is, I have a phrase which is called confusion leads to inaction. If athletes are confused on what to do and where to go and how to do it, and people are reaching out to them, they think NIL is not for them. It's like anything
Mhm.
else in life. If you know what you're doing, you're proactive about it, things will work out in your favor. And it doesn't have to be just big deals, right? We're talking about lessons now, right? If you're a volleyball player, right, you can get, listen, I could be a D3 volleyball player, and in my area, maybe there's 4 girls that want to be a college athlete like myself, and I can charge $50 an hour, bring them together, do a lesson. That's $200 an hour. Do that once a week. That's $800 a month. Now I'm reaching out to that local restaurant. I'm reaching out to brands. I'm on these marketplaces like Barstool and Icon Source, right? And I'm
Mhm.
making $100, $200 there a month. Now you see, oh, we're showing them a path to make that $1,000 a month. That's
Right.
that's that's real money for people. And then, by the way, you're getting in reps. So we talk about the 4 years. What about the 4 years? When the
Mhm.
college athletes go to leave school, right? A lot of them aren't going pro, right?
Right.
99.9%. Or the
Right.
ones that do go pro, by the way, eventually you might not play long enough or you'll never need a job before.
That's right.
When college athletes leave school, this is what they're told when they go to get jobs. We love college athletes. We love your skill set. Work well with others, accountability, time management, coachability, work ethic, but you have no experience, right? You've been playing sports, right? So you're either going to get $10,000 less, or we're going to pass over you until you have experience. Well, if you engage in NIL, even if you're making $500 a month and you have an LLC and you're doing deliverables, when someone says that to you, you can counter and say, no, no, no. I have more experience than every college student, not just athlete, student in the country. Because
Mhm.
not only have I had those skills you like, I've been operating and running a business, the business of me. I've built brands, I've negotiated contracts, I've filed my taxes, I have an LLC. You're more marketable now. By the way, if you want to start a business, guess what? You already did. You just didn't realize it. You've been an entrepreneur. You're getting those reps. So we need to get away from the national narrative of bag dropping and what this can be, which is the utopia of building your brand, getting ready for life after ball, because that's the whole point of college.
Right.
Getting ready for life after college to succeed.
That's fantastic. Great stuff. Great stuff, Pete. How can people reach you?
Uh, Pretty easy. You can reach me at NIL Pete on Twitter. You
Mhm.
can email me at peter@athliance.com. But usually you give me a follow on Twitter. I'll give you a follow back. We'll open up those DMs and we can go from there. So at NIL Pete.
Great. Really appreciate you coming on, Pete. And we'll keep in touch. The NIL community is growing every day. Opportunities are growing every day, and as advocates and as people who put people together, we're here to see it grow.
Awesome. Looking forward to hopefully coming back on and doing this again.
All right. Take care, Pete.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of NIL Active. Stay tuned for more episodes.